Darkness falls across the land, the midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood to terrorize your neighborhood. Sorry about that, that was a subscriber request. Armored Pants here, and I have a video for you on the new premium tank, the Annihilator. As always, we have a complete guide for you, but before we get into the video proper, just a quick reminder of something which happened very recently. We opened up the Discord channel for this YouTube channel, so please come and join us there. You'd be very welcome. I'm on almost every day, so you get a chance to chat with me, but also some other brilliant YouTubers and some other brilliant blitzers and some generally just great people. So come and join us there, you'd be more than welcome. There's going to be a link in the description. Now, as always, we're going to have a detailed look at the tech spec of this tank. We will use blitzhanger.com to do that. And of course, this tank is currently available in the event, in the in-game event. And I guess many of you will want to know how to play it if you get it. And of course, the burning question is it worth getting? And the answer is a definite yes. This is an excellent, excellent tank. One that you will very much enjoy and that you kind of need to get because it's almost probably is OP. And we're going to have a look at why in a very detailed tech spec. And I'm going to talk you through some of the things that you need to watch out for with this tank. So in terms of the technical spec of this tank and setup, in terms of provisions, I would run tinned food, improved fuel and field rations. That's going to max out your performance, view range, reload, etc. In terms of the gun, it has this Cerberus gun, triple barrel 80mm cannon. It's an unusual gun system, it's one which is new. Before that, only the Helsing was double barrels, now this is triple barrels, so something very different. I would run calibrated shells, supercharge and refined gun. Refined gun is extremely important because of dispersion, and we're going to discuss that later on when we look at some of the limitations of the gun system. In terms of penetration, you got 179mm of pen with AP, 231mm with APC or 50mm of pen with HE. Burst damage is 630 with AP, going up to 750 with HE. Shell management, you need to be careful because muzzle velocities are all different. 1274, 1567, 1136 with AP, APCR and HE respectively. That is a deviation of 30% between the lowest and the highest muzzle velocities. So you need to take note when switching through different shell types. Dispersion is 0.326, right? But you get another 0.3 after you fire. Therefore, there's a dispersion multiplier effect in play here, which needs to be managed carefully. If we look at the gun index, we see why, right? So the gun index is 12 on the first shot, which is excellent. But because of that additional dispersion, the multiplier effect, it decreases to 6.5 in the second shot and the third shot. So therefore, you need to take corrective action. And in gameplay, we're going to look at how you can make some corrections for that. We also see why we said reducing dispersion and using refined gun is so important, because if you don't, then you have an exponential multiplier effect, which makes it even more difficult, right? In terms of the armor profile, the turret is just troll. You can see here it also has good relative armor numbers at the side, so you can side scrape in this tank very easily. The turret is more or less impenetrable, but it does have this small vulnerable part on the top, which you can see here in the yellow above the red of the main turret. It has strong turret armor. It has very strong turret armor in terms of its tier. I mean, I think it's only a few millimeters less than the IS-3 at tier 8, right? So it's really, really strong. It also has some decent frontal armor, but the lower plate is vulnerable, of course. It also has this spaced armor at the tracks here, which is going to protect you a bit, especially when HE or heat is fired at you. It doesn't really have much armor at the back, so you're very vulnerable, but it does have some decent armor on the back of the turret. In terms of concealment numbers, you need to be very wary, because when you're vulnerable from the side, right, and you have poor concealment numbers, so a tank with 302 view range is going to spot you up within 275 meters, or if you're moving within 286 meters, so you're going to get spotted up all the time. You only do 35 kilometers per hour. Therefore, I would recommend you use this enhanced engine accelerator, because it increases you to 43 kilometers per hour when it's running, and it boosts your power to weight ratio to make it better because it is poor. And basically it moves the mobility index of the tank from 2.4, which is actually okay for a tank, but it moves it up to 5.2, which is really good for a heavy tank, particularly tier 7. So basically that means that at the start of the game, when you're going to get spotted up by these light and medium tanks with a really significant view range, you can get across the map and into position, so you're not going to take shots into the vulnerable side of the tank. One other thing to note is that the tank has 8 degrees of gun depression, so with that turret, it's a hold down monster. Not of course as good as a 10-degree gun depression, but certainly this 8 degrees definitely gives it this hold down option, and something to consider, particularly when you look at the strength of that turret. Now I'm going to have a look at some gameplay here. By the way, one thing I should probably point out is that somebody at Wargaming is very, very clever, right? Because the name of the gun system is Cerberus, right? Cerberus is, in Greek mythology, the dog of hell, the original hound of hell. He guards the gates of Hades and stops the dead from leaving. And if you're wondering what the thumb is that I have for this video, it is the Annihilator battlesuit, which is created in the DC comic universe, right? And basically it was it's a super villain. It's created by Hephaestion for Ares in fighting the Justice League, and of course they are both characters originally from Greek mythology. So therefore the Annihilator name itself has links to Greek mythology, and then the gun system name Cerberus has links to Greek mythology. So somebody who's Wargaming is very, very clever and definitely deserves a bonus in their paycheck come this Christmas or Halloween or whenever they get their bonus. You can see here the gun depression is not quite as good as you would expect with an American or British tank that has 10 degrees of gun depression. Just wanted to show you that there. But it is nonetheless pretty okay, and I'm just showing most of the turret here. I'm not really giving too much other targets to fire at, but there's nothing really doing here, so I decided to move on. Now, you have seen earlier in the shots on the Leo that at close range the gun is really effective, and it's a DPM monster, right? Here we're going to see a shot at further range. You can see 2 of the 3 go through, 1 doesn't, and that's what we're talking about. That's that dispersion and the dispersion multiplier, right? It's something that those of you who've played the Helsing a lot will have experienced, right? But here you have it even more so, because there's 3 shots firing and you get that dispersion multiplier not on the second shot only, but on the third shot as well. So you'll find quite often when you're firing the gun system, the Cerberus gun system, that sometimes the first shot goes through and the second and third don't. Sometimes the first goes through, the second doesn't, the third does. And you very often find that 1 or only 2 shots go through. Now, we spoke about how you can mitigate this, how you can make allowances for this. So basically what you want to do is you want to let the aiming circle close in as much as possible. So and then you're able to make shots, as I did there on the Gravedigger, where you sort of counteract the exponential dispersion figures, and you get more than 1 round that goes through. So if you aim very carefully, let the aiming round all center and become as small as possible, that will mitigate the factor. The further away a target is, the more carefully you have to aim, because dispersion, as we know, is calculated at a distance of 100 meters. So therefore, every meter over 100 meters means that your dispersion is increasing exponentially. It increases at a rate of the square root of the original dispersion figure. You don't have to worry about that, it's complicated mathematics. I have it all, by the way, calculated and worked out for you in the gun index, the gun handling index video, which is on the advanced tutorial section, so have a look at that if you're interested. But basically what it means is the further away it is, the more careful you have to be. Simple rule of thumb, right? So don't worry about the mathematics, we leave that to the boffins, but you know, it's something that you need to be careful of. You saw here in this game almost 3k damage without having too much of a spectacular game, so it shows this is a DPM monster. And it really is a good and effective tank. And you can see here sharpshooter and master gunner badges. Why is that? Well, you're going to get them a lot, right? Because if you aim carefully, basically only need to fire off 3 rounds because you get 9 shots, and then the 4th time you fire you're going to get your Master Gunner badge, right? So it's pretty easy. Of course you have to aim carefully because there is very much the chance of missing. So basic golden rule on this tank is when you're close up you can be a bit more lax, but when further away you need to be very careful in your aiming. Make sure that you minimize that dispersion by letting the aiming circle close into its minimum possible distance. Those of you who are more let's say studious observers of the game will have noted now that with those dispersion factors it means that doing tracking shots, deflection shots are going to be more difficult, right? Because you know, you're not firing 1 round, you're firing 3, so trying to get one of those to hit on a moving target or rapidly moving target is going to be slightly more difficult. But if you aim further ahead than you normally would, then you have a good chance, because basically you're going to spray, so you're going to get like a shotgun effect, so you have a good chance, especially if that kill shot or that shot is within one of your rounds, because you know you've got 3 chances of hitting instead of 1, so you have a good chance of hitting, but of course making a max roll is going to be more difficult. Now we said we would talk about the dispersion, right, and how to manage it. So let's have a look at this shot here, right? So firing into the back of the Panzer IV's, right? Now you'll note when we slow it down, all the shots go into one spot, right? So you go bam, 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 all 3 shots more or less into exactly the same spot. So why is that? Well, if we look at the distance that the target is away from us, the Panzer IV's, it's within a short distance, and it's far less than 100 meters. So therefore the dispersion factors are minimal. As we know, as we said already, dispersion is calculated at 100 meters and increases exponentially thereafter, but below 100 meters obviously it's a lot less, so you don't have to worry so much about it. So again, golden rule, when a tank is or a target is close to us, we can be a bit more confident, a bit more exuberant, a bit more risk taking in the shots that we fire. However, we're going to have a look now as I capture this base across the valley at the Black Prince. Now we'll have a look, and again same thing, we're firing across at it, but look at the impact points on the Black Prince. Slow it right down. They don't all hit in the one spot, right? Because now we are over 100 meters away, right? So we see the dispersion in action here, and this dispersion multiplier. So we see, if you slow it down there, you can clearly see all 3 shots hit different spots in the Black Prince. So therefore, to mitigate that, we need to be far more careful when firing at shots over 100 meters away. And what we need to do is 2 things. We need to let the aiming roundel decrease to its minimum possible dimensions so that we get the most accuracy. We also need to aim at a large target. What do we mean by that? Well, a larger part of the tank that we're firing at, as I did there, firing at the flat on the side of the Black Prince, rather than, for example, firing at the turret or something, because then you're increasing your chances of missing. If you fire at a large part of the target, you have a better chance of all 3 or 2 of the shells landing. If you try to be smart and aim at a really small part of the target tank, then you are increasing the likelihood of missing. So simple rule is twofold. 1, let the aiming roundel decrease to its minimum possible dimensions, and secondly, aim at as large a part of the target tank as is possible. Follow those golden rules, you'll manage that dispersion, and you will manage that dispersion multiplier, and you'll get more hits than you would otherwise. We see here, even when managing the dispersion, I only get 2 out of 3 rounds through, and you're going to have to accept that. That's when you're firing over a distance of 100 meters, you're going to get that. But on the plus side, you get this, right? Massive bounce from that turret. That turret is just trollish, so you get a massive bounce there, and you will get bounces like that especially when you're hull down. So again, you know, I can't emphasize enough that there are really only 2 drawbacks to this tank, and they are the dispersion multiplier and those poor concealment numbers. So manage both of those and you will have a lot of joy with this tank. Manage the dispersion multiplier as we just demonstrated there, especially when shots are over 100 meters. Manage that those concealment numbers using the enhanced engine accelerator to get you across the map as quickly as possible, particularly at the start of the game. Do those two things and you will have a lot of joy with this really fantastic tank, and you will enjoy playing it an awful lot. I've seen some people say it's better than Smasher. I'm not entirely sure that it is, but definitely it's certainly on a par and certainly worth getting. The other limitation it has, of course, is that those really poor concealment numbers. So get that enhanced engine accelerator and use it when you're moving at the start of the game, particularly if you're traversing an area where you can be spotted up by fast moving enemy tanks that have a long view range, because you're quite vulnerable at the side and at the back, and if they track you, you can have a bad game before it even begins. So let's have a recap of this really excellent new tier 7 heavy premium event tank. So you know, it really is a great new tank. It's a great event tank. It's definitely worth going through the event to get. You won't be disappointed, and it's definitely something you're going to want to have in your garage, much the same as people want to have the Smasher and the Helsing. It's unusual, it's a new gun system, and it's a great addition, I have to say. And as I said, really clever, the naming of this, given its links to Greek mythology. There's a 13.6 second magazine reload, and then you saw that it fires almost all at once. There's only 0.3 of a second between shots, and that's going to do 630 burst damage. If all 3 rounds hit. Has decent pen numbers too, particularly when you consider that it's only an 80mm gun. But if you're up tiered, I think you're going to need APCR for sure, so load some of that up. And as I said, and I can't emphasize enough, manage the dispersion. You also need to manage your shell types, because as we said, there's a 30% difference between the lowest and the highest muzzle velocity. Manage those poor concealment numbers, so run that improved engine accelerator, and just be aware of the fact that you can get spotted up often and early in this tank, so just be careful in the opening part of the game especially. So cheers Mush, thanks for watching, I hope you found it useful, I hope you found it enjoyable, and I guess all that remains for me to say is pants off.